Hello there and welcome to my Arleon guide for Songs of Conquest. In this video I'm going to guide you through everything you need to know about this faction. So we're going to go over the codex, talk about the wielders, their troops, their magic, their economy, and their strategies. Let's get started. So wielder wise you have a nice assortment of options. We have Cecilia with a focus on defensive options, Adele, which is one crazy nuker. She has the channeling skill which increases spell damage, and she comes with a built-in spell damage power bonus. So if you want to nuke, she's the girl to go to with the Arleon faction. Jandra Stormspire is an all-rounder focused into chaos magic, gives you the opportunity to go into chaos magic options real quick. These are very, very nice things to go for if you want to be mobile and or focusing destructive magic, stuff like that. Gnaw is your go-to guy if you want to hammer in some damage with the Fey troops. This guy just has it all, but he's focused more on the melee side of things. He has a ranged offense bonus here, but mind you that the only ranged Fey troops that you got are your high-tier Fey nobles, and yeah, it is really cool to pair these even on top of that on Gnaw, but it'll take a while until you get there. He also has no defensive qualities for himself. If you check out the other wielders, they all have some sort of a focus. In Gnaw's case, it is a very, very strong bias into one direction. Lady Hammond is your blitz tactics hero. She runs cunning and has some defense for human troops. She's excellent with knights. She even starts with some. Cunning is a steroid for your first couple of turns. So she's ideal to break up people who want to try turtling, as she has a very, very powerful upper hand in the very first turns, if you max out cunning that is, and you come up with a higher defense level. So if you stick to human troops, she's excellent to break up people while not being too vulnerable at all. This is a really, really cool combo. Paradigm is your go-to explorer guy. He's also versed in creation magic, but he has a high movement, he has a higher view radius than other heroes, and yeah, that is a really, really cool thing to start with. So if you just want to hire a logistics dude, Paradigm can serve. Ravenfair, well, it is very obvious. She is your go-to person for ranged fighting, but she also feels the same higher movement and view radius. Her downside is her defensive qualities are really not too high, so if you want to go for a scouting hero, usually you can decide between Paradigm and Ravenfair. Silverlink, on the other hand, is a economy hero. He starts with taxes, and he also runs a very, very interesting specialization, troop movement. This 1 point of troop movement extra does make such a big difference on the battlefield. You can pair that with the many buff spells that the Arleonese feature, namely increasing troop movement and mobility even further, and this makes Silverlink to a very, very interesting choice. If you like movement, this is a great hero. That's what it boils down to. But his start with taxes always makes him a fancy pick if you just want to have some extra money on the side, although that's really one of his worst sides, in all honesty. That specialization's really kick-ass. And last but not least, we have Vilya, which is your go-to wielder if the enemy runs nuke tactics. That 40% spell damage resistance goes places. You can learn extra magic resistance on top of that, and, well, it is really hard to nuke armies with magic if you run Vilya. So she is a specialist hero. You won't be running her at all times, but if you know that your enemy will pelt you with magic, that's a great pick. She's just an awesome pick into that regard. Now, let's talk about troops. We got the militia and the sappers at the bottom line. These are clunky shooters. That means they have the reload feature. They shoot once, then they reload a turn. Their ranged offense is relatively low. Their damage is okay-ish. It's not high, but it is mitigated by the fact that their stack size is really, really high. They have very low initiative, they have a lousy range, their redeeming quality is quantity and low price. That's pretty much it. The sappers don't get much better. Their average damage is better than the militia ones, but apart from that, they gain a relatively low amount of extra stats. Even the stakes ability is well, it ain't bad. In all honesty, building up a barrier that people can't bridge is not a bad skill, but it ain't a great skill. It's just okay, alright? They are okay troops, with their biggest advantage being their amount. So they really shine in that regard, but they are among the weak, or maybe even the weakest ranged units in the game. Among the weakest or even the weakest. I think this depends on taste. We have on the next end the Rangers. These guys come out of medium buildings, and if we look at the damage, it doesn't look that much better than the militia ones, but their offense skill is much higher, and their range is a lot higher, and this makes them really much stronger. It is counteracted by their troop size, but oh well. It all gets better once we get towards the archers. They have a really decent range, good initiative, damage is still quite low. This is just the real downside about these, but it is okay. Average damage is smidged lower than other ranged units, but it ain't horrible. It can be absolutely mitigated by boosting ranged offense. Their real shining part is the ambush skill, which allows you to just set up traps where people get pelted by attacks once they get into deadly range. They are really good at complementing troops that turtle up. You know, if you want to let the enemy come towards you, have some shields and bulky dudes in the front, and these guys on the ambush stance. Great stuff. Really great stuff. But apart from that, they are nothing much to talk about, in my humble opinion. We have the minstrels next on the plate, which are your troop supporters, your musical unit, as every faction has one. They are pretty decent fighters, seriously. They have a pretty decent offense skill, damage ain't too lousy, and don't mistake them only for supporters. They pack quite a punch. They also offer quite a lot of essence for a low tier unit, as they are absolutely bottom tier. You can build them with the lowest tier building, and compared to the militia, they produce double the amount of essence. Their spell is pretty useful. I always love stacking defenses because that's what Arleonese are really good at, and the Troubadour is just more of that. He's a much better fighter. Seriously, the damage is not bad for a troop stack, considering their offense skill ain't too bad at all. They have a decent initiative, but they are quite slow on their feet. They're pretty good if the enemy goes into your backline, and you can pretty much decently soften up enemy stat that threaten your backline pretty decently with them. That's what I use them most for, besides buffing, of course. Footmen are your real superstars against ranged combos. They have a 50% ranged resistance, they have a decent defense skill, and they have an excellent initiative. They come really in front of pretty much anybody else in the turns, except for boosted troops and such, but all in all they are really nice as they can position themselves where they are needed in most of the cases. Their damage isn't much to talk about, seriously. This is really their most glaring weakness, but as they are not meant as damage dealers. The Shield of Orders here emphasize that even more. Their damage doesn't go that much higher, but boy oh boy, defense goes up, health goes up quite substantially, plus 12 HP, don't underestimate that, that's really a lot. Initiative goes up a smidge, but the real superstar thing here is the Protect skill. This is amazing. You can boost up the defense by 25%. I mean, 25 points of defense can be 25% of damage reduction. It is a hexagon field, and seriously, you can't just put up one single Shield of Order in the middle of a hexagon formation and they can't pull off that shenanigans. They are super strong. They're really strong defenders, boosters, linebackers that can always be where they need to be because their initiative is really decent. Moving over to the Knights. Oh boy, these are your go-to blitz tactics. Troops that can pack a punch and also survive after that. They have a lot of health. Their defensive and offensive skills are really good. Their damage is insane, being boosted even further the more they get to walk a turn. They also inherit the shielded trait just like the footmen, so you can really send them into the ranged enemies without breaking a sweat, as they can really digest the retaliation attacks. Big downside, troop size is low, cost is obscenely high, and if we go to the Fists of Order, this goes down the same venue. These are really powerful units. They are among the most powerful things the Arleonese have, and a big benefit of these, not directly visible, is that they come very early into your availability. They are medium buildings units, the castles are relatively costly, but these guys, seriously, 75 health, whammy damage, nice offense and defensive stats, movement is really high, initiative could be higher, but I mean they need weaknesses after all. Biggest downside, the cost of Celestial Ore. This is really a pretty steep number, but on the upside you get the strengthened trait, which, you know, if you can't blitz down the enemy, this is one hell of a booster. 20% more damage plus 1 static point of damage. This can bolster up your low quality units insanely. It's mostly interesting for the low tier units, as the higher damage numbers get, the less meaningful that +1 gets. But seriously, for the sappers or the rangers, this does make a huge difference. So you can use them either as line breakers or as supporters in the back line. The upgraded ones, that is. The basic version is just a really powerful line breaker that, well, a couple of them will die because their health is relatively low in the baseline, but yeah, paladins, man, they're awesome. Now, we're moving into the Fey territory. We gain the Horned ones, and these guys are... they're so fast. Initiative is high, movement is high, offense is high, damage is super high, health is also super high. What's the downside about these? They're berserkers. That means once they get one blow on them, their defense goes into the negative even, and their troop size is really low. That means they are really packing a big punch, but they'll go down really quickly. This makes them excellent blitz troops that just go down a kamikaze path, but they surely take down what you want to take down, because the amount of damage that they can dish out is obscene, and they act before most enemies can act. The upgraded version, the Queen's Guard, on the other hand, is a lot different. They are much more bulky, and they gain the ability to defend, so they can buff themselves before going to battle, effectively mitigating their berserker downsides, and they generate a lot of essence when they fight. So, pretty good stuff. Still die quite quickly though, because the berserker trait is just what it is. It is a damage steroid, but it certainly doesn't serve them too well and makes them mostly squishy. I somehow feel like the berserker trait on these guys is even a flaw. I don't know. Maybe I have misunderstood something. Let me know if you know. Either way, if you can keep them off the fire, if nobody's focusing these guys are stupidly strong at dishing out tons of damage. Into a similar venue go the Fey Spirits and the Fey Ragers. These guys have obscene amounts of damage. Their cost, their damage, their movement is out of this world. But, seriously, that health, they only have 8 HP. So if you check back, your militia and your rangers are squishy as that. A filthy little minstrel is tankier than that. A footman has more than double the HP than these guys. So they are really burning out fast. But, if you can get them close to the enemy, they'll sure as hell deal more damage than the enemy wants to. The Fey Ragers, on the other hand, are much more specialized, but they are very similar. They inherit all the other things. They don't even get more damage, which is a very interesting trait, but that is because they gain insane extras here. They can actively make them immune against magic. This is... oof. Seriously, you just can't be nuked with these guys. So nuke combos really suffer from this part here, and they also get to attack double, which means if you smuggle these bad boys somewhere where the enemy is vulnerable, sure, they'll die in the retaliation next turn, but I bet if you can pull it off correctly, they do much more damage than the other way around. And always think about one thing: if they have to take down the Fey Ragers in their backline, you get to dictate the tempo of the fight you get to command the other side of the battle and you are in advantage, even though they will die. You need to replace them. That's a big downside. They mostly don't make it into the next fight, but wow, what a damage. Last but not least, the Fey Nobles. These are your highest tier Fey troops. They are stupidly strong ranged fighters with decent range, stupidly strong melee stats even, so you can field them in both venues, no problem. They cost you Glimmer Weave, so they are alongside with the Fists of Order your costiest troops, and they have a passive boost of offense and initiative. This is even strengthened on the Fey Queens, which are just the souped up version of the same, which gain the ability to hit more than one target when they attack, but the inspiring boost stays the same. The cool thing about these is, if you have empty slots in your army, and you have more than one Fey Noble, you can spread them thin, and just place them between your backline and use this sick bonus that they just provide. If you boost them together into one cluster though, they are stupidly strong fighters that provide a lot of backline damage, and these make you truly viable. So, let's move over to the magic. So, the Arleonese have access to 3 different elements with their troops: Order, Creation, and Chaos. So that gives us an assortment of interesting spells. On the Order side, we have insane boosts. Like, seriously, we're going here over the higher tiers. Protection is just a baseline spell, but can be applied several times in the same turn, mind you that, if you have a lot of Order, since you can just spam that on one troop, and the higher tier you get, the more you get to spread that out. Quicken is an excellent boost that, plus 1 troop movement, can get you so far. I love that. Pacify is outright nuts. If you have a high tier Order mage, this can cripple the enemy entirely. Since Arleonese troops are fairly haughty, and it is easy to stack up defensive stats with these guys quite high, combined with Pacify, you can aim that on the highest ranking enemy stack and just nuke their ability to hurt you. This is insane. One of the strongest spells in your roster, don't sleep on it. And Rally, yeah, well, it's a one-time boost of all your stats. Costy, powerful, and the better you get in Order magic, the more impressive the spell grows. Creation magic, on the other hand, is nature magic mostly, which fields you initiative debuffs. That is really good because you get to decide that one troop that hurts your game plan gets to act later. Don't sleep on that spell. This minus initiative can really be powerful. It's less about the damage. Earth Block, yeah, it's a situational spell, but sometimes maps are made in a way that this really shines. Mist is an outright insane spell, making your troops unattackable, and the better you get in creation magic, the more troops you can make unattackable, which makes blitz tactics insanely atrocious to deal with, as you know, you can't just bring your knights and Fae and whatnot into the face of the enemy and make them unattackable. That's pretty nuts. Acid Cloud is a really nice siege spell, allowing you to slap down a field of damage somewhere, but it does require quite a good focus on creation magic, otherwise this spell is pretty unimpressive. Chaos, on the other hand, gives you flexibility and damage. Chaos Step is an amazing spell. Use that on your blitz troops, move them a little bit ahead, and boom, they go into the backline. The better you get at chaos magic, the easier this gets. This spell has an amazing amount of uses, and I really love it. Basically, whenever you feel like you can't reach what you want to reach, use it. If you want to bring a troop to safety, use it. There are, I don't know, I love this spell, alright? Boiling Blood, on the other hand, well, if you have a high spell damage running, this spell can be devastating, as it is stackable on the enemy, and the essence cost is dirt cheap. So, with a high spell damage, can go places, without very underwhelming spell. Tempest can totally disrupt the enemy's ranged capabilities, so on a blitz champ, this is wow. So, you need to be good at chaos magic though, but if you run Fae, you can easily acquire that. Chain Lightning is a nuke spell, requires focus and into chaos magic, but really can go places. Let's talk about the dyads. Fury Order and Chaos Mixture spell is insane. If you happen to be really good at Order and Chaos magic, you can, from one turn to another, decide that your turtle formation is now dealing insane amounts of damage and bursts down the enemy. This spell is, in the right moment, a game changer. Must be used in the right moment though, must be used in the moment when you feel like you can one-shot a lot of troops if they have that 25%, 50% or 75% extra damage. Works only for melee though, entirely useless for ranged. Clouded Vision is an amazing debuff for any ranged enemy. It is so powerful. I don't need to say more about that. Crippling the enemy's range lets them move closer to your enemy, and boom, just like that, you gain a easy advantage. Swap is Creation in Chaos and goes into a similar venue as Chaos Step and is truly powerful. So this allows you to smuggle troops completely into the enemy backline. You just swap with somebody who sticks his head out too far, and yeah, you can really have some fun with that. Pretty cool spell, but also very situational. Much more situational than Chaos Step. Then we got Invigorate, which is a Order and Creation combo, which is pretty nuts. You see, any form of troop movement increaser in my book is a very powerful thing. Getting the ability of boosting this up to +2 or +3 even, you know, somebody with high Order and Creation magic can just sweep over into the enemy backline just from the first turn with that spell. Pretty sick stuff. Onslaught is the last spell that we have available naturally via the native units, and I'll not cover the other diets. Onslaught is just, yeah, I love it. +1 attacks makes your troops in any aspect so much more versatile. It works for ranged units and melee units alike, and the better you get at the magics, the longer this lasts. Stupidly powerful because it is practically in all situations a powerful spell. There's never a situation where you're like, nah, I don't want to attack twice. And therefore, I love this one, because it doesn't need much situation, it is just good. Alright, moving over now to the economy of the Arleonese. It's a pretty quick chapter, but I want to cover it nevertheless. So, if you want to go down the human specialization path, your mainstay resource will be Celestial Ore. This is required for research on the troops and for hiring the troops, therefore you will be stuck with a lot of Celestial Ore costs. Glimmerweave is the resource for the Fae faction. End of the statement. Practically all of the upgrades for the Fae require Glimmerweave in one way or another, and Glimmerweave is also the stuff that you hire your troops with. So if you want to run a Fae focused build, Glimmerweave is your resource of choice. And Amber runs a little bit in between the lines. They are not too dependent on it. There are researches that require Amber, namely here, for example, the couple of the low-tier troop researches. Order research requires Amber, but it is the least important resource. And of course, gold obviously is necessary for every faction, but I just wanted to point out the rare resource spread here. Now then, strategies for the Arleonese. We excel with this faction in a couple of fields. First off, turtling up, being defensive and being hard to kill is a quality that you can't get with any of your troop types. Arleonese have a tendency to have high defense stats on their human troops. But the whole Fae troop is pretty much the other side of the medal. They're all fast, die easily, deal lots of damage, and they are a much more dynamic and proactive playstyle. So if you combine these qualities together, you can have a lot of different strategies. Namely, I just want to give you a couple of ideas. You can run Gnaw, where they focus on Fae troops. Run entirely Fae troops, but mind you that you need something for the defenses, so it is no shame to smuggle in a couple of Shields of Order into Gnaw's assortment to have something that can't just hold the line and not die immediately, because Fae troops are just melting like ice in the sunshine. This guy doesn't even have any defenses. So all in all, burning down people is happening with Fae troops. Gnaw is an excellent choice for that. Basically, you can pick this guy if the enemy is really low on defenses, and can be easily squashed by a big alpha strike. If the enemy is more resilient, then you should really just pick up Lady Hammond and go crazy with the Knight tactic and just slap their face. Add in a couple of Fey Ragers or Horned ones to amp up your Blitz tactics even more, and you're good to go. Ethiel, on the other hand, is your go-to wielder if you want to go all into the whole chaos and creation strategy. She can deal out so much damage, and going for creation and chaos magic, there is enough bang in these spellbooks to validate her playstyle. The interesting part about what we got there with the magic that she fields is that she still has access to a lot of versatile spells. Chaos has utility still, and so does creation. It's not a direct focus on destructive stuff like destruction magic itself, so there's a lot of utility in it. What we don't really excel at is a ranged army that is good in the mid game. We have ranged options for the early game. Seriously, stacking up militias and archers is insanely strong early on, but it gets toppled over by almost all the mid-game strategies that I've ran into. This is really not that powerful. If you want to have a late game with a wielder like Ravenfair, you need to rely on the Fey Nobles and on the Shields of Order to keep your lines solid. Almost all of these builds profit from minstrels. In my personal opinion, the militia should be only chosen if you really need to range bang early on, but if that is not really the case, stick with the minstrels. They are all over the board the better troops than the militia. You see, you pay only so much, so few more gold coins for that much better troop. All in all, I want to focus with Arleon. You can go for a armored blitz, Fey blitz, a magical tactic on Ethiel with it, which is very nukey, and you can also focus the different magic paths. But I gotta say, all of these heroes that start out with a bonus on essence generation, it is smarter to mix and match in the in other parts and not focus on magic alone. Ethiel is, in my humble opinion, the only wielder of the Arleonese that really shines in a field of a pure magic wielder. All the others are much better in composing troops together to fulfill their goals. So, all in all, I hope I gave you a couple of ideas and thoughts about how to work with the Arleon faction. I enjoyed them a lot. What I personally didn't like about them is their very limited capacities in early game ranged combat. Personally, I love that. It's one of my favorite strats, nuking the enemy from afar and dealing with the rest of the softened up bits and bobs. This is not quite how Arleon works. You will always have some attrition, you will always have to lose some troops, because melee focused builds just tend to do so, but it is easy to replenish your troops. Thanks for watching, you all. Leave me your comments down below. Let me know what you want to see else, and feel free to leave a thumbs up, consider subscribing, and in the description box you find a playlist link to the rest of the series. So feel free to check out. Have a wonderful time. Thanks for watching, and also, I'd be very happy if you'd be checking out those support links to Patreon, PayPal, or Buy Me a Coffee, or consider a YouTube channel membership. Either of these would mean the world to me, and a big thanks especially to you, of course, for watching this video until the very end. That's very cool of you, and I deeply appreciate it. Bye bye!